untimely drops of spray by an awning, the sailmaker and his mates, the ship's tailor and his, titivating it with minute stitches, while every hand aboard added half an inch of seam around its ample verge. It was considered the handsomest ensign in the service. But for the moment the flag was absent from Stephen's mind. Indeed, the mind itself was in a singular state of absence, hesitation, even stupidity. Before being called to the wretched boy, he had known at least the general trend of the passages that were to follow the words that lay there before him. But now he was filled with doubt, and to give his wits time to settle and clarify, he mended his pen, clipping its tip with a minute pair of metal jaws made for the purpose, and trimming the sides with a lancet capable of splitting hairs. Yet the right free, easy, candid expressions would not come, though the Christine in question was very dear to him. Stephen had long practised medicine, a calling in which discretion is often of great importance, but for an even longer time, if time is to be measured by stress, he'd been an intelligence agent. And here discretion was of the very essence, since an unguarded word or step might lead to the agent's death and to the death, the often hideous death, of his friends and the destruction of their cause. He sat down, his expression still tolerably blank. He was a lean, middle-sized man, unremarkable, of mixed Catalan and Irish origin, but it was the tropical sun and the sea air that accounted for his dark complexion, not any mixture of Moorish blood, for although his birth was illegitimate, which weighed upon him, his ancestors had been Christians time out of mind. A man of something less than 40, though he looked older as his mind wrestled with the difficulties of giving the intelligent woman he longed to marry a coherent, plausible account of the Surprise's activities and of her present return, mission accomplished. For as soon as Captain Aubrey joined the South African squadron in the River Plate, going aboard HMS Suffolk, taking command of her and hoisting or causing to be hoisted the flag, blue at the mizzen, her act would turn him into that glorious creature, a rear admiral. The likelihood, the virtual certainty, was that Surprise should return to England, carrying Jack Aubrey's official dispatch, 2 young men who were to pass for lieutenant, and a great number of papers and certificates from the boatswain, carpenter, gunner and purser, justifying the expenditure or replacement of almost every item in the ship's unbelievably complex gear, furnishings and supplies, from pistol flints to great round shot and innumerable blocks. There was also a flat, factual, unadorned account of the Surprise's meetings with the Chilean authorities, and of her proceedings, together with volume after volume of her activity in charting and surveying the South American islands and coasts. She was one of the smaller frigates, carrying no more than 28 great guns, and although in the right hand she was an outstanding sailor, she had been sold out of the service when heavier craft were built, and Stephen had bought her. So there she was, eminently seaworthy and available for hire to the hydrographical service of the Admiralty, once Napoleon had been dealt with and the Western world was at something like peace. Her ostensible function was to survey and chart the little-known coasts and innumerable islands of the recently independent Republic of Chile, and to help form its navy, training the young officers. All this was perfectly avowable and even praiseworthy, but the voyage had other aspects that were never distinctly laid down in written orders, but that were implied and understood on either side. And here total candour was wholly out of the question, so that Stephen's letter home could obviously not be all he wished. In the first place, through Stephen's innumerable connections, Jack had been appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Chilean Navy as well as Admiralty hydrographer. But the frigate's voyage had been slow, very foul weather south of the Horn, and when she reached Chile she found that the situation had changed remarkably. Apart from anything else, she was met with a bewildering number of juntas, of more or less independent governing bodies belonging to widely differing political parties, one of which had appointed its own commander-in-chief, though all were obsessed by the fear of a Peruvian invasion by land or sea, or both. Peru was still ruled by the Spanish king's viceroy in Lima, and it still possessed a powerful, well-trained navy. After a very great number of vicissitudes, changes of ministry, and so on, it appeared to Jack that since his main duty, often expressed in London but never committed to writing, was to preserve the independent Chilean Republic, the best way of doing so, and at the same time of protecting his beloved infant Chilean navy, was to attack the Peruvians in their port of Callao, and, if possible, to cut out their powerful frigate Esmeralda, the heaviest, best-armed man-of-war on the Pacific coast of America. This he did with extraordinary success, at the risk of his life, and he brought the Esmeralda back to Valparaiso. He was much flattered and caressed, but later he was treated very shabbily indeed. His men were not paid, they were denied their prize money from various sources, and upon some pretext his ship was threatened with impoundment. Yet though Jack sometimes behaved like a simpleton by land, and though he was often swindled ashore, he was sea-wise. And having provisioned and stored his ship with the basic supplies needed to carry her at least to some port in the Argentine, he handed the Chileans an ultimatum. Either his men must have their due by a given date, or he should sail away. They were not paid, and he did sail away. Yet although the Surprise's voyage had something of the appearance of a failure, in fact the Spanish hold on South America was broken. And although this hadn't been the Admiralty's direct order, the result gave immense satisfaction in the proper quarters. Furthermore, Jack had on board a singularly amiable and gifted young man, the unacknowledged but much beloved illegitimate son of Prince William, Admiral the Duke of Clarence, a zealous sailor, and almost certain to be king after his brother's death. Clarence had a great respect for Captain Aubrey. Some of Jack's actions were indeed extraordinarily brilliant, and through Dr. Maturin, who had treated His Highness for a variety of disease, mostly discreditable, had begged Jack to take the youth on this voyage, and young Hanson had distinguished himself as much as any loving naval father could have wished, cutting the Esmeralda's cable and carrying her out under fire. Yet even this wasn't all. On the Pacific coast, Jack and Stephen had met with a small, stout vessel filled with fellow members of the Royal Society, two of whom, ornithologists, were determined to cross the narrow isthmus of Panama and return to London by the Atlantic. And these excellent creatures agreed to take Jack's dispatches. The news of his famous victory and the preservation of Chile back to the Admiralty, then in the process of forming a South African squadron. Maturin and his chief, the head of naval intelligence, had long since established a system of rapid communication across the Andes, and it was thanks to this arrangement that Jack received the Admiralty's beautiful reply, a signal requiring him to proceed to the River Plate, there to go aboard HMS Suffolk, taking command of her, and hoisting his flag blue at the mizzen that had spread such happiness throughout the ship. Yet although the ephemeral Chilean ministry had fallen, to be replaced by one of its many rivals, the satisfaction that might have been supposed to accompany an assured independence was by no means general. There were many Chileans who regretted their old friends and their declared